Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharani Nirvasesha Sunyavari Paskachada Satarani. So I've been asked to say something about how I became a devotee. And we can go into specifics, but let's go for the general theme first. The general theme is that I was a fool and a rascal. And somehow or other I met the devotees and I got Srila Prabhupada's books. Actually, I got Prabhupada's books first. I was living in Southern California and thinking that everything was just great. Sea breezes were blowing, I had a youthful body, I had a comfortable life, I was accepted in a prestigious university. All I had to do was stay on the conveyor belt and I was going to enjoy like anything. Or so that was the advertisement. But there's a saying that one of the symptoms of mental illness, like obsessive compulsive, is to do the same thing again and again and expect a different result. If you do the same thing, you're going to get the same result. That's reality. And I saw around me all types of people who had everything they wanted materially. Om Jaya Jagadishari, give me a new car and a house by the sea. So they had everything they wanted, but they weren't happy. Two things I noticed. That their character was not very good. They were full of anxiety, and there was exploitation, self-centered. I mean, there's always some pious people, but generally speaking, people were, what is it, Bhagavatam says, unlucky, misguided, and above all, always disturbed. So Prabhupada says there's fool number one and fool number two. Fool number one is the one who says something foolish. You know who fool number two is, young men? Fool number one is the one who says something foolish. Fool number two is the one who follows. So I was thinking, so many fool numbers one, should I be fool number two and follow? So this was rattling around in my brain. But I didn't have an answer. I talked to the Christians, they don't have a philosophical answer. I talked to the Buddhists. The desire to become desireless is a self-centered desire. So that was sort of a dead end. What do they say? Better to have loved than lost than never to have loved at all. So to become zero. Prabhupada says, if you go to the doctor and you say, I have a fever. Suppose you take your child to a doctor and you say, oh, my son has a fever, he needs help. And the doctor says, okay, and he gives a pill and the child dies. What the what? And you say, was the fever gone? Pay me my fee. So sure, you got rid of the fever, but you killed the child. So the idea that, oh, let me kill my identity, become, merge into, oneness, or sunyavadi, to become nothing. It's spiritual suicide. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur used to say. So sure, you're solved, you're not suffering, but you try to eradicate your identity. Even that you can't really do, because Nitai Swarup Krishna Das, the soul is eternally the servant of Krishna, and cannot be withered or dried or burnt, or Bhagavad Gita explained, you can't destroy the soul. But anyway, so I was vexed by these different things. And as far as the Christians, what does God look like? He's an old man with a beard. What do you do there? You play a harp and you have wings, and they have no idea what's going on. What does God look like? What does he do? No idea. And if there's God, here's another one that bothered me. I have two children. They're adult children, grown up now, no problem. They're all on their own, by Krishna's grace, and good devotees, nice kids. Now, how, as the father, I have a son and a daughter, can I decide that my daughter is going to have a great life? Good brain, nice looking, everything's going to go easy, and she's going to have a great life. And my son is going to be ugly, less intelligent, suffer like anything, get hit by a bus, so much. Can I do that? How can, as a father who loves both of my children, how can I, these disparities? And yet, we look out at the world, there's some people who have an easy life, some people have a difficult life. I'd say, why do good things happen to bad people, and bad things happen to good people? Why? If there's only one life, just put the factors, the different, wheels in the machine. We have only one life, Christians say. God is all powerful. God is all merciful. If He's all merciful, He must feel something for the suffering of the living entities. If He's all powerful, then He could fix the problem. He should have both the soft heart and the ability to fix the suffering of the living entities. If we have only one life, then why? How can God pick that? How can God make these decisions? He can make everybody happy. Doesn't make any sense. Here's another one. How is a small child, how is a child born blind? How is a small child 1 month, 2 months, dies, gets some disease and dies? What did that child do? Why do they deserve to die? And another, they have no answer. They actually have no answer for the existence of evil in this world. So the Christians didn't make sense. The materialists weren't really enjoying. They were on a feudal dead-end, circular Ferris wheel, merry-go-round track. Buddhists didn't have the answer. So I was vexed like this. Simultaneously, I was arrogant. I'm even more arrogant than I am now. And I was thinking I was a golden boy kissed by the gods, enjoying everything in Southern California, where the sea breezes are also blowing. People think just as a sidelight, people think, oh, Southern California, everything is nice, home of Disneyland, Mickey Mouse. No. There's earthquakes, forest fires, possibility of tidal wave, drought, drive-by shootings from gangs. It's not what it's advertised to be. And I met the devotees. Actually, the first thing that happened was I was riding in a car, and I was thinking, I'm going from one useless place to another useless place. And in transit, people in the car are all talking useless. So I was from a rubbish place to a rubbish place and talking rubbish on the way. So I thought, what is this? I was feeling frustrated, deeply frustrated, existential angst. And I saw in the back seat of the car, there was a book. It wasn't even a full book. It was just a section of a book. The cover and the front and back covers had been torn off. So I thought, well, I might as well read something as long as I'm going from one foolish place to another foolish place. And it turned out to be the 6th chapter of Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. And it was like those movies, when they turn the page and the bell, the chime of time, dong, and I turn the next page, dong. It made such profound sense. Everything made sense. I could immediately, we're not this body, we're the eternal soul. Therefore, as Jesus says, man does not live by bread alone. I explained a question of evil. What was the ultimate goal of life? I was so relieved and enlivened. I thought, with one chapter of this book, I don't even have the whole book. One chapter of this book, I have gotten more information than reading through the entire library of the university. So as soon as I said, stop, we went past the bookstore. I said, stop the car, stop the car. I got out, and by Krishna's grace, they had so many Gitas there, but they actually had Prabhupada's Macmillan Gita. So that was a major I began reading Bhagavad Gita. It made complete sense. So from that point, I felt there was some hope. But I saw the devotees, and somehow or other in my befuddled mind, I didn't connect the devotees to Bhagavad Gita. I saw the devotees chanting. I thought they were Buddhists. So either they were two things. I was living in Laguna Beach, California at the time, and there were so many hippies. This is 1969. And I remember thinking, they must be hippies. They must be on LSD. They've taken some drug and they're bouncing up and down. They're crazy people. Either they're crazy people or they're Buddhists. And there's many things we can learn from the Buddhists. I don't mean to make, speak ill of the Buddhists. But I thought they don't really have the answers. So I wasn't interested. I used to see the devotees, Actually, I was probably too sinful and arrogant, and Krishna was blocking me from associating with the devotees. I would see the devotees chanting, and I would cross the street to avoid them. And my brother, I mean, very much in his debt for this. One day my brother said, hey, there's a Hare Krishna temple. There's a temple. He didn't say Hare Krishna, he said there's a temple. And they have a Sunday program. And they did say Hare Krishna. He said, oh, that's those people that are singing for their supper, jumping up and down. I don't want to go. He said, and we were vegetarian. I was a vegetarian. My brother was a vegetarian. So he said, no, but they've got this great feast afterwards. So I thought, well, I can sit through anything for an hour. I figured there'd be some talk. They'll blather on about this and that, Buddhism, or I said, well, if there's a good meal, I can sit for an hour. That'll be a sociological survey. I'll study all the different what's going on. And afterwards, I'll get a good meal. So I went to the temple. And just as a sideline, you have to understand hippie days. It was wild. There was the devotee who gave the talk. I don't remember much. His name was Chinananda, I think was his name. Anyway, he gave the talk, and in the talk he said, you have to surrender everything to Krishna. Okay. Then there's a kirtan. You have to understand, on the altar there was just Lord Balaram, no Jagannath, no Subhadra. And Lord Balaram, he didn't have any clothing. He was just painted Lord Balaram sitting on the altar. So, I'm coming from the West, idol worship. I had please forgive me, brother. I had no idea what was going on. And they had a picture of Lord Chaitanya and dancing. And I thought, he looks very beautiful, but I don't know what they're doing. So there was that. There was arti. So everyone stood up for arti. And all of a sudden, this group of hippies next to me began to take off all their clothing. Whoa, I said, I didn't know these guys were nudists. I said, this is too much. I'm not. And then I saw the temple president. I didn't know he was the temple president, but I could tell he was, someone in charge. He came over to, talk to them. So I asked later on, I said, what was this? And he laughed. He said, the person giving the talk, the Sunday talk, it said, surrender everything. So they thought you should surrender all your clothes, So that was the atmosphere. Another thing that I thought, so I started coming to the temple. I want to get back to something, but before I forget, it just goes to show how we don't know anything, and how the devotees were so sincere. There was a little, the temple room wasn't any bigger than this room. And the back wall, they'd put on hinges. It was a wood door, and they would just open it. It would open right onto the street. And everyone was just standing out in the street because there wasn't room in this tiny temple. And we used to get like 100, 150 people because it was in the hippie days, so many far out people were coming. So they had Gita class Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And I started coming to the Gita class. And I saw there was a fish bowl, a little glass fish bowl, and it was with water. And this devotee every evening, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, after Gita class, he would walk out, he would pick up the bowl, and he would pour like this, and pour water all over his shirt. So the first question I ever asked the devotees, I said, after a few days I got my courage up and I said, what is this baptismal ceremony? I thought it was some like immersion in holy water. And I remember the look on the temple president's face. He was thinking, what is this guy talking about? I said, he takes the fish bowl and he pours the water on him. And the temple president began to laugh. He said, no, for cleanliness, we don't touch our mouth. He's trying to drink, but he's not very expert, and he's spilling it all over himself. So I said, oh, okay. Another time, the devotees work hard for Krishna. And they were getting up early. We used to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning. There was no Mangal Arati. But even then, 7 o'clock, they go to bed 10:30, get up at 7 o'clock. But it was early for those days. And I remember I was sitting in class, and one by one, all the devotees, only about 4 or 5 devotees, fell asleep. And finally, the speaker, the devotee, Durlab Prabhu, the devotee giving Bhagavatam class, he also fell asleep. I was the only one awake in the room. And I remember thinking, oh, all these great souls have left me far behind. I thought they'd shot off onto some mystic trance and they'd gone off into some deep meditation, and I was, But then one of the brahmacharis started, I said, oh, wait a minute, they've fallen asleep. So it was very blissful in those days. But what happened, back to that original first Sunday feast, so the lecture, I couldn't figure out exactly what was going on. I had these hippies taking their clothes off. I had Lord Balaram, standing on, also with no clothing on. I couldn't figure out what was going on. But the prasadam was good. I remember that. I do remember it was very excellent prasadam. I can remember to this day. There was pushpan rice, there was garanga potatoes, samosa, nice, simply wonderful. It was a nice prasadam. So when I was leaving, I thought, well, that was interesting. But I wasn't planning on coming back, except for prasad. I would time it just right. But as I was walking out, there was a book table. And on the book table, they had the Macmillan Gita. They had Prabhupada's Gita. So I asked, I was surprised. I said, you teach from this? Because I used to carry the Gita with me wherever I went. I had a little bag, and I carried the Gita with me wherever I went, Prabhupada's Gita. So I asked, do you teach from this book? I thought like they're eclectic, like it's the Tibetan Book of the Dead one day, and it's the Aquarian Gospel another day, and maybe it's the teachings of Lao Tzu. I thought, I didn't know what was going on. And the devotee said, no, this is the cornerstone. This is the basis of our teachings. We read this book. This is it. This is our, Rosetta Stone. This is where everything's there. So I was very impressed. I said, I'm saving my money. I want to go to India and find this man. I want to hear, Bhaktivedanta Swami. I thought I'll find Prabhupada in some Himalayan caves. Krishna will help me. So I was planning on somehow they're coming to India. They said, you don't have to go to India. They said he's having a writing retreat in Los Angeles. I said, can I go? They said, yeah, but we don't have a car. All the devotees had was a motorcycle. First time I saw devotees like this, two brahmacharis on a motorcycle, Sikhs flying in the back, flying. Whoa, because we'd never seen anything like that. You have to understand. I thought are they Martians? Have they been beamed down from another planet? I couldn't figure what was going on. But, so the devotees only had a motorcycle. I said, I have a car. I said, I'll drive you. So we started going. Prabhupada would give the Sunday feast talk. And I remember going to the Sunday feast, and I was thinking, I was already, in my heart, I'd accepted Prabhupada, but I thought, just to make sure, let him convince me first. I wanted to hear what Prabhupada had to say. So I didn't bow down when I came into the temple room. To my eternal shame, I didn't bow down. And in the lecture, Prabhupada said, it is all right. He was speaking to the audience, but it was right to me. He said, it's all right that you don't bow down. He said, you can bow down out of love, you can bow down out of knowledge, or you can have your head pushed down at the time of death. Either way, you must bow down. And I thought, whoa, I was so impressed by Prabhupada. And the first time I saw Prabhupada drink, this was how I saw it done properly. The devotees in Los Angeles, we're going a little bit afield, the devotees in Los Angeles got Prabhupada one of the first self-winding wristwatches. They're kinetic. I think they have a gyroscope, or they have something inside, some kind of, I don't know how it works, magnet or something. But by the movement of the wrist, it winds itself. So you don't have to wind it, no battery. That was before battery days. So Prabhupada moved so serenely, although Prabhupada was practically not sleeping at all, maybe a few hours, 2 hours, 3 hours max, maybe a nap in the afternoon, traveling all over the world. So Prabhupada was super active. And yet his movements were so serene, so economical. By that I mean not wasting, so graceful that the watch stopped. They had to get Prabhupada a winding watch because Prabhupada was so, such a transcendental personality, a genuine power. The devotees told me before I went to see Prabhupada, they said he's a Paramahansa. So I said, what does that mean, Paramahansa? They said, like a swan. So I was thinking he has a long neck. And I thought, oh, they must mean graceful. That's why I was thinking like that. But I saw Prabhupada drink water, and he picked it up, and he poured, seemed to me from 3 feet away, and everything, his hand was a perfect mudra. And not only was he pouring, but he was swallowing it. Like we pour, I pour, I fill my mouth up, then I swallow. But he was pouring and drinking simultaneously. I had never seen it. I thought, this person is not of this world. He was such a, obviously, a sublime personality. So I saw Prabhupada, and I was convinced. And we started trying to think, what else? So then, eventually, I moved into the temple. And my parents were so upset that my father came and punched the Laguna Beach Temple president in the nose. Boom, right in the nose. So, to avoid getting punched again, they moved me to the Los Angeles Temple, where Prabhupada, by Krishna's grace, Prabhupada was there. And my mother sat across the street from the temple and said, I'm going to fast until I die if you don't come home. My parents were good parents. I can never repay them. And I could have done it so much more maturely, but I was just a foolish and passionate brahmachari in those days. So I remember my mother sitting there saying that she was going to fast till she died unless I came home. My father said, you're no son of mine, you're killing your mother. So I was thinking, maybe I should go home. Maybe I can chant Hare Krishna at home and, like that. And Vishnu Goswami, he was a brahmachari at the time, but one of the great heroes of our society. Prabhupada said his voice could enchant the entire world. He made so many devotees. He was like Narada Muni. He made hundreds of devotees. Powerful, big. He was tall. He was like 6'6", very handsome. The way he got out of the draft, we've got a little bit of field. Everyone was getting drafted into the army because of the war in Vietnam, and everybody was getting drafted. Unless you wait, it's a long story, but so many people were getting drafted. The way he got out of the draft is he went to the draft board. They interviewed him, and he said, "My meditation is so important that if I stop, the whole world will fall into ruination." And the doctor, who's examined you, he said, "Look, either you're crazy or you're right." He said, "Either way, we don't want you." And that's how he got out of the army. So just such a kind and wonderful person. And a big prasadam taker. He used to take 2 or 3 plates of prasadam. He was very nice shape. He wasn't fat, very strong body, but he used to take a lot of prasadam and hardly sleep. So such a saintly person. So Vishnu Jan Maharaj, he put his big, strong arm around me. I was this young brahmachari, bhakta. And he said, and I asked him, what should I do? He said, if you go home. So I said, suppose you go home and become the perfect son. You win the Nobel Peace Prize, you become President of the United States, you win an Oscar, whatever accolade, you graduate from Harvard, PhD. Do you know what PhD stands for? Permanent head damage. Anyway, if you use it for Krishna, it's okay. But even you become PhD, Harvard, whatever it may be, still, your mother's going to die. And you're going to be sitting, crying. And where your mother goes, nobody knows. And all of the deeds that she did, misdeeds, you have a devotee mother, that's a different story. But all the misdeeds she does, all those fall on her head. Here's an interesting fact. We have a Goshala in Southern California, and one of the devotees gets a magazine called Dairyman's Magazine, and it tells you how to, it has all kinds of how to take care of cows. And there's an advertisement in there for an antiseptic scrub. You scrub every 6 months, whatever it is, to keep the cow healthy. And it says that the average cow has over 2,000 hairs per square inch. Next time we'll get your calculator. 2,000 hairs per square inch. One of the devotees figured out the surface area of an average cow. How much, So how many square inches? And you take how many square inches on an entire cow, and you multiply, each square inch has 2,000 hairs. Billions, with a B, billions and billions of hairs on that cow. And if you kill a cow, according to Manu Samhita and so many places in the Vedas, you have to take birth for every hair on the body of that cow. So can you imagine? Birth and killed, birth and killed, birth and killed, butchered again and again and again. And in America, everyone eats beef. Barbecue, beef, It's a big deal. So it's considered high class. You get a big steak. You know, it's horrible. So where does my mother go in her next life? I spin off in one direction. How are you actually helping your mother? Vishnu John gave me a great example. He said, suppose you're standing on the bank of a river. A raging river is going by, right? And you see your mother and father, your loved ones, being swept away by the river. They're saying, help me, help me, help me. Do you jump in the river and try to save them? What will happen to you? You'll also be swept away, isn't it? But if you're on firm ground and you throw them a rope, then you can actually save them. You have to stay on firm ground and pull them to you. That's the only way you can save them. So this world is called a river of names. It's earth, fire, water, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego, Sankhya, yoga is there, 25 elements. It's all, the Buddhists say, we can learn something from the Buddhists, nothing is certain but change. Krishna says in the Gita that everything in this world is constantly mutable. It's always changing. So it's a river of names only, different forms, constant growth, maturation, culmination, decline, dissolution, and death. Everything is going through this. So it is a river of illusory forms only. And if you jump into that, if I were to jump into that and try to help my parents, I'm not helping them. But if I stay on the firm ground of Krishna consciousness and pull them out, that is the real thing. So I was convinced. I said, he's right. This is true. If I really love my parents, I will help them become Krishna conscious. That's real love. So I went across the street to my mother, and I said, it's very good that you're sitting under this tree. Many great saints have become self-realized sitting under trees. I said, you can hear the holy name. I'll bring you Bhagavad Gita. You read Bhagavad Gita. I'll bring you prasadam, breakfast, lunch. And I said, very good. You sit under this tree, read Bhagavad Gita, take prasadam. A very good decision. My father completely flipped, as they say in America. Took my mother. That's when he said, you're no son of mine. You're killing my dear mother. Got in the car and drove off. About a week and a half later, I got a letter from my father's attorney. I'm out of this will. I'm out of this trust. He said all the different properties my father owned. I could not step foot. It was a legal injunction that I could not step foot on any of the family properties. Everything. I was completely disowned. And my father, with his own hand, wrote at the bottom. He said, if I could take away your family name, surname, if I could take away your family name, I would. That's pride. But to make a long story short, as time went on, it's a long story, we'll tell that at some other time. Gradually, it became purified. So much so they became very helpful to the devotees. And just, I'll tell how my father passed away and my mother passed away. Because I was a little attached to my parents. I mean, they were good parents. So I actually, and later on they became very helpful in my devotional life. So my father walked into the hospital. My father was 85 at the time. Completely conscious. Brain was still working, everything. He was a sharp guy. But he had a pain in his side. So they said, you have some abdominal block, this and that. They took him into the hospital. In the hospital killed him. In the hospital, he got some kind of virulent lung disease, some kind of raging pneumonia. They didn't have any antibiotic for him. He went into a coma, and they considered him, he was clinically dead. They had him on the breathing machine, so many things. And he was in a coma. Nothing. He was in a coma for 2 weeks. And they said, there's nothing we can do. They said, we can leave him on the breathing machine, but practically speaking, really he's just, heartbeat is there, but it's only because there's no brain activity. What to do? So my mother, they'd been married, whatever it was, 65 years, She was heartbroken, but they talked about it, and she said he was a very strong-willed man. He would never want to be like this. So she said that you unplug the machine, and if he lives, that's God's grace. Otherwise he would never want to be warehoused like this. So they unplugged the machine, and she left the hospital. She went home with my sister. She couldn't stay. It was too much for her. So my brother and I are there, and my brother, my materialistic brother, my dimwit Christian uncle, are there, and I'm there. So I couldn't put on kuntimala on my father. I couldn't, chant. So many. They wouldn't let me. And I was thinking, here's my father, such a nice man. He's helped me in so many ways. Here I am, his son, and I can't help him. I was really feeling badly. But I was saying, Krishna, please help me somehow or other. Let me help my father. And if you've ever been with someone who dies, as a priest sometimes, I'm there, Quite often, not always, but quite often they call it the death rattle. The breathing changes, and it becomes lit. You can hear them, So I said to my brother, I said, Jeff, my brother's name, I said, I think this is it. I think he's leaving, And my brother, there was all this battery of equipment, all this monitoring, for the heart rate and brain rate and this so many things. It looked like an Apollo, NASA moonshot. So my brother reached over and said, no, this reading says this, and this reading says this, and this reading. And the screens were all touch sensitive, which you didn't know. So when he touched the screen, everything went, wee-ya, the whole thing freaked. So my uncle panicked, my brother panicked. They ran out to the nurse's station to get the head nurse and get the doctor. And I thought, this is it. I said, Krishna's mercy. I leaned over and I grabbed my father. Remember, 2 weeks, 10 days, I think, in a coma. Couldn't move, couldn't speak. They said he was dead. Unplug him. I said, Dad, this is it. This is it. I said, say Krishna. Say Krishna. I didn't know if I'd have time to get the whole mantra. And I thought, he can't do anything, but at least he can hear. Quite often when they say you're in a coma, the last sense to go is hearing. So I thought, he can hear. So I said, say Krishna. He sat up, opened his eyes, put his hands towards me, clear as a bell. It was obviously he was looking at me. Put his hands out, because I had his shoulders. He put his hands out to touch my shoulders. He didn't have the strength to do it, but he reached out, said Krishna, fell back in the bed dead. Pretty blissful, huh? And by that time, the nurse, the doctor, my dimwit Christian uncle, and my brother were standing there. And my uncle said, what the hell was that? Because how is it possible, And I turned to him and I said, that was an auspicious departure. So I was very grateful. And the way my mother, just to book in the story of them being so upset and unhappy, my mother became very nice. One thing is that she used to babysit my kids, because I young boy and girl. And I was temple president, so I had so many things, and she would come, and she liked, she's a grandmother, she likes to play with the grandchildren. So she would babysit sometimes. So I came back, maybe I was bringing her some lunch for Shadam or something. We had our little apartment. And I saw my mother on all fours on the floor, chanting to the floor. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. And my little kids, my son couldn't have been more than 4 or 5, and my daughter would have been about 6 or 7. So they were Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, they were dancing. They were very happy, they were dancing. And so I said, what is this? What are you doing? So my mother explained. She had been reading Krishna book to them. They're kids. What they want to hear Krishna book or Ramayana, Maharaj, those kind of things. So she was reading to them, and some bug had come crawling on the floor. So West, they don't know these things. She just squashed the bug. And my children, they'd never seen it. What the, they say, Grandma, you killed the little bug and its spirit soul, part and parcel. What did he do to you? What? They're little kids. And they're devotees and squash this bug. What did the bug do to her? Why was she bothering the bug? Well, at least you take the bug outside, So she was, and her grandchildren are crying, obviously very upset by this. So my mother said, what do I do? What do I do? They said, you better chant to it, Grandma. So she was chanting to the departed soul in the little bug body. So she had so many experiences like that. So she became, she actually would chant japa sometimes. She would distribute back to Godhead magazine. She became quite nice, So, but anyway, the way she left her body, she was old. She died once my father was gone, she really lost the will to live. So maybe a year and a half, 2 years later, they'd been in a hospital, they'd taken her from the hospital, they couldn't do anything, so they put her in hospice, She was home. So my brother, my sister, and I were rotating, taking turns. So I was sitting there chanting japa, and when at that end of life, they sleep a lot, and then they wake up a little bit and they sleep some more. So she'd been resting, and she opened her eyes and she looked at me and she said, "Do you think I'll be born in a devotee family in my next life?" I said, "Definitely, Mom, definitely." She said, "That'd be good. That would be very good." And she lay back on the pillow and left her body within an hour. It's the last thing she said, you know. So I'm deeply indebted to Krishna for so many reasons, but he actually took good care of my parents. They left in a nice way. So there it is, a little bit of my life as a devotee. Hare Krishna.